Okay, if you're gearing up for college, you have definitely heard of the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. And for so many, it feels less like an application and more like an impossible maze. It's the key to unlocking thousands of dollars in financial aid, but it's super confusing. Don't worry though. Today, we're giving you the map.
Does this kind of chaotic tangle of questions look a little too familiar? Yeah, you are not alone. It's a feeling shared by millions of families every single year. One of the biggest hurdles with the FAFSA isn't even a specific question. It's just that sheer feeling of being overwhelmed by it all. It's so easy to get lost in the jargon and terrified of making a mistake. But today, we are going to light up that path for you. We're going to tackle the myths that stop people before they even start. We'll look at the costly errors that can completely derail your aid package. And we'll talk about those complex life situations that just don't seem to fit into any of the boxes.
All right, let's dive into part 1, myths and misconceptions. See, before we even get to filling out a single line on the form, we've got to talk about the mental roadblocks. So many families get lost in this maze right from the get-go because they're starting with a broken compass. They're working off assumptions that are just plain wrong.
Okay, this is the big one. The number one myth. Families think, hey, we make too much money, so why even bother? But the reality is, the FAFSA isn't just a simple income check. It's a really complex formula that looks at your family size, how many kids you have in college at the same time, and a whole bunch of other factors. So here's the most important takeaway. Even if you don't qualify for federal grants, tons of schools require a FAFSA to be on file for their own scholarships, and even for some loans. The golden rule is always apply. You could be leaving a ton of money on the table if you don't.
And this right here, this is another huge source of stress. Families worry that doing the responsible thing, saving for retirement, is actually going to end up penalizing them when it comes to financial aid. But here's the good news, and it's a really big deal. Your qualified retirement accounts, things like a 401k or an IRA, and the equity you have in the home you live in, they're basically invisible to the FAFSA. They are not counted as assets. That is such a critical piece of information, and hopefully it helps you breathe a little bit easier.
Okay, moving on to part 2, common costly errors. So once you get past all the myths, the next set of traps are these simple, totally avoidable mistakes. These aren't about your financial situation itself, but about the little details on the form that can have absolutely massive financial consequences.
And I'm not kidding, the stakes here are incredibly high. We are not talking about small typos. A simple error that could have been avoided can literally cost you thousands of dollars in grants and scholarships. This isn't just about getting the paperwork right, it's about securing the most affordable path to that college degree. So what are these big errors? Well, let's look at 3 of the most common. First up, using the wrong parent's info. In cases of divorce, this gets really confusing. The rule is you use the financial information of the parent the student lived with more over the last year. It's all about residency, not who claims them on their taxes. Second, bad data. Even just accidentally misreporting an asset or some income can trigger major delays or worse, reduce your aid award. And third, filing too late. Don't just look at the federal deadline. A lot of states and colleges have much earlier priority deadlines, and that aid is often first come, first served. You miss it, it's gone.
Let's get into part 3, navigating complex situations. Because let's face it, life is rarely simple, right? So what happens when your family's situation doesn't fit neatly into the standard little boxes on the form? Let's talk about how to get through those tricky scenarios that the standard FAFSA formulas can really struggle to understand.
Life can really complicate this process. For instance, a remarriage means the step-parent's income and assets now have to be reported, and that can drastically change your eligibility. Here's a big one to watch out for. Any money saved in the student's name is assessed at a much higher rate than money saved in a parent's name. And what about a sudden job loss or huge medical bills that your old tax return doesn't reflect? These are what are called special circumstances, and they require careful handling. Usually it means you'll have to appeal directly to the school's financial aid office to explain what's going on.
All right, so you've navigated the myths, you've sidestepped the errors, you've figured out your complex situation, and you hit submit. That's great, but believe it or not, the journey isn't over yet. The phase after you submit has its own set of hurdles to clear.
One of the biggest surprises people run into after submitting is something called verification. The easiest way to think of it is like an audit from the school. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you did anything wrong. In fact, about 1/3 of all applicants get selected for it. The school will just ask for documents, like tax transcripts, to prove the numbers you entered are correct. The key here is to respond fast. If you're not prepared, this process can freeze your entire financial aid package for weeks, right when you need to be making those big college decisions.
And verification is just the first hurdle after you submit. Next, you're going to get financial aid packages from different schools, and you'll need to compare them carefully because they can be wildly different. And probably the most important thing to remember is that this whole process, it's not a one-and-done thing. You have to renew the FAFSA every single year your student is in college. Knowing this whole path, including how to appeal if your situation changes down the road, is the real key to maximizing your aid for all 4 years.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway from all this? Well, it really just comes down to this idea. Knowing the pitfalls is the first and most critical step to avoiding them. That FAFSA maze feels so intimidating because of all the unknowns, but now you have the map. You know where the traps are hidden. And that awareness is your most powerful tool for navigating the process and finding the best financial path to a degree.
Look, I know it's a lot to take in, but knowledge really is power here. So much of the stress that comes with the FAFSA is just from the fear of the unknown. But you're not in the dark anymore. You know the myths to ignore, you know the errors to watch out for, and you know the challenges to prepare for. So the only real question left is, with this new map in your hand, are you ready to find your path?